Hey guys, and welcome back to the Yes Means Yes podcast. My name is Faith Naumcheff. I am the ARP Counseling and Outreach Coordinator. And this week we actually are going to have university student Sydney host the podcast and ask both Amanda and I questions about our organization and kind of the intersection between sexual violence and corrections as part of a school project. So I'm going to go ahead and let Amanda introduce herself, and then Sydney introduce herself, and then let Sydney get to asking questions for us.
Hey guys, my name is Amanda Carpenter. I'm with Rape Counselors of East Alabama, and I am the Victim Services Coordinator here with RCEA.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sydney. I am the student who's going to be leading this podcast today. And one of my majors is sociology with a criminology focus. So the whole point of this project is really just to explore the intersectionality between different resources available to individuals in corrections, and then also just get a better insight into what exactly the RCEA does. So without further ado, the first question I wanted to ask was, there are a lot of different ideas and misconceptions about what defines, we'll just say, sexual assault, for example. Do you guys have a set definition that you share when you go out and do outreach or anything like that to help students or anybody participating in the outreach better understand what exactly that is?
So I think for us, we try to kind of use the definition of any unwanted sexual contact, any unwanted like physical sexual contact.
Okay.
I think that kind of leaves it open enough to where it's not, basically, like, oh, well, this fits that definition, this fits that definition. So really, whoever expresses anything like that, we would see as a victim.
Okay, awesome. I have a couple statistics that I wanted to include, especially since I'm a college student and there are not a crazy amount of statistics about us, but we do seem to be the most prone population, unfortunately. So, according to the RAINN, which is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, women ages 18 to 24 are at elevated risk of sexual violence. And specifically among undergraduate students, 26% of females and roughly 7% of males experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation. And in addition to that, among graduate and professional students, roughly 10% of females and 3% of males experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation. So I know that my class specifically has had an outreach opportunity and we learned a plethora of information, but I know from different experiences as a student that you're not always the best equipped with that information and understand how to handle if a situation were to arise, what would you even do? Because this was honestly the first time I've ever gone through a structured introduction to it was through this course. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you think students are educated when it comes to sexual assault, other aspects, so steps to get help if you've been assaulted in addition to anything else?
I guess how I would answer that is like RCEA, we work, we're a nonprofit organization that covers 6 counties. So we cover Lee, Macon, Chambers, Tallapoosa, Russell, and Randolph County. Within those counties, we do serve different universities and community colleges. And then we also, with our prevention education, go to schools K through 12 and do different curriculums like Aaron's Law, safe dating, healthy relationships, things of that nature. And I would say with us here at RCEA, within the 6 counties, we do go out and try to educate and let people know that we're here, that we're a free service. We're a resource for anyone that's been sexually assaulted and their friends and family. But we also work, within, for example, Auburn University has what's called Safe Harbor. And so we work a lot with Safe Harbor. And so we're kind of that outside source for them because there's things that Safe Harbor does more with in-house, and we kind of can help a lot with the outside of the university. For example, if someone's wanting to file a police report and they're not just wanting to do Title IX, then that's kind of where we step in and we kind of go through that process with them. We do go and talk to different classes. We talk about who we are, what our resources are. We do mention, if a friend discloses to you that they were sexually assaulted, these are your options. We definitely go out and do that. But of course, we don't go to every single class. And the university is very wide with lots of different majors and things of that. And we really have tried to step outside of those main classes that we talk to. For example, Faith and I, we supervise interns with different majors such as human family development, science, social work, things of that nature. And so we are trying to venture outside of those classes. But we do go in those classes and talk a lot about that. And then, of course, trying to get interns from those degrees that can come in and really get that experience. However, do I feel that the typical person knows a lot about sexual assault? I think it's one of those things people don't want to think about it and don't really talk about it unless they are affected or someone they're close to is affected, which statistics show that it does happen a lot more than we would like 1 in 5 female, 1 in 33 men. However, before I started this job, I did my internship with East Alabama Mental Health, and I worked in the prevention services with the drugs and alcohol. And you would set up a table, get out those resources. People are a lot more make themselves a little bit more available to come to those tables. But when you have a table set out for rape counselors of East Alabama, people don't really want to come to your table because they don't want to be associated with it. I do feel, due to the numbers of our calls by hotline and medical, I do believe more people are aware of sexual assault, how that looks, especially about consent. It's still, stigmatized, but at the same time, I do think people are more willing to talk about it. Because I know here recently I've had several calls from the hotline and I'm like, well, how did you hear about us? And they're like, well, I had a friend that you came to her class, or, things of that nature. So I definitely think people are a little bit more aware of it. But I also would have to say that, when you go into these classrooms and you talk about it, people are hearing it, but I don't know if they're fully listening to every word of it. But I do think that it has increased with people's knowledge about sexual assault. Especially, with the media goes a long way. And I know that we've had a lot of things within our society here lately where they do talk a lot more about sexual assault and things. So it kind of draws people more to listen to it and to learn about it. Does that answer kind of what?
It does, and it kind of leads perfectly into my next question, actually. So obviously, a lot of social topics can be really hot topics and they can be difficult to discuss. And you never know what kind of situation you're walking into, even if you're going into a university setting and you're going to speak to a sociology course. And there's, again, students from all different majors, because I myself am a double major with a minor, but I love my sociology classes. But I wanted to ask, do you think approaching education or the topic differently may help students be more receptive to sexual assault education?
I mean, definitely. I think, especially as social workers, you have to meet people where they are. That's what Amanda and I kind of were taught in our education. And so the way that we would go into universities and speak about, sexual violence would be very different than if we were to go into a church group or if we were to go into like a community group. So I think that for sure. And I think that's also something that we are lucky to have a lot of college-aged individuals working with us as volunteers and interns. So it is a little bit easier to understand, like what almost is working, or how to reach those populations. And I think that a good example of us kind of shifting a little bit to try and reach those is we have a podcast, we have a YouTube channel, we've done TikToks in the past. And I know that it's kind of like why does this rape crisis center have a TikTok? But we're trying to reach those populations, and that's where they are. They're on social media. So I think making it understandable, digestible, less stigmatized, and us comfortably talking about it in whatever setting it may be, hopefully is showing them, okay, it's okay for you to talk about it. It's okay to bring this up. And something that we have, tried to do in our education pieces is give actionable ways for them to address sexual violence after the fact or through prevention, like Amanda said, how to be a friend, or figuring out how to promote a culture of consent rather than rape culture, which is super, super prevalent on college campuses. So that one's definitely like a fluid thing. Like, we're trying to keep up with where they are and how to reach them. So yes, definitely constantly, I would say, trying to like evaluate, especially that population for sure.
And I think too, like just with the education part, it's just this very education is one of the most important things because it shows awareness. And I think that, growing up, you always hear about drugs and alcohol use and things of that nature. And so trying to kind of bring sexual assault into that where it's okay to talk about it is definitely important. But I also think it's very important because there's a lot of things that people are just not aware of, especially when we're talking about consent and we're talking about the state laws and how all that, is put in place. So I think just educating everyone, of all gender, race, all of that is so important because, for example, I have teenage boys. Well, I guess they're young adults now. And I have a 20-year-old, almost 19-year-old, and they know about sexual assault. They understand what consent is. They know all of those things. However, they know those things because of what I do. And so I think that, the thing is, well, it only happens to females is what a lot of people, hear. And that's not the truth. And so talking about it and just letting people understand what consent means, what sexual assault is defined, and knowing that there's resources, and telling our victim and survivors that it's not your fault, you're not to blame, or it's just very important words for people, and that's just educating people. And Faith has done an amazing job with the social media. Because like she said, they hit all those platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I mean, that's what a lot of people, if you look around in a room, most people are on their phones and they're not texting people, they're looking at social media. So that is so important. So, yeah.
Okay, so why do you guys think, since we talk about how education, especially with the RCEA, is trying to be pushed so you can reach more audiences and people know that you're there and it's okay to discuss and it's okay to actually reach out and receive any assistance that you could possibly need. So why do you think that sexual assault education has still continued to be stigmatized, even though it has become more common and it has become a greater part of public discussion, especially in the more recent decades?
I think a big reason for that is, even if we just look at the sex education policies in Alabama, it's not required. We're still operating off of pushing abstinence. And so I think that with that comes a lot of misinformation or no information, right, on just sex in general. And so if we're not comfortable talking about sex, how comfortable, how aware are we when it's not consensual sex, right? When it's rape. We're already told that that's a taboo topic. And if you're not, incredibly familiar with it, you're going to associate the two. And I think that that's a really big part of it, is the stigma around it. We're not educating kids early about these sorts of things for sex. And again, if we're not even talking about sex, we're not talking about rape. We're not even talking about, in a lot of instances, correct body parts or any body parts. So I think that understanding we learn things very early,
Mhm.
and with, certain cultures in the South, this is sex is bad, right? And then add on to that the layer of shame of what happens, you know, when this happens without your consent, right? And are you someone who maybe isn't educated on enough to know that you didn't give your consent, right? It's a very, very nuanced topic. And I think that the education in the schools would be super, super beneficial to help it, but we're just not there yet. Legislative wise, we're just not there. Um, so I think that that is a big part of it, right? We're not talking about it early enough. We're not able to talk about it. Sex is still super stigmatized. So that's my take on it, I guess.
And I would say a lot of it is also people don't, unless someone is actually affected by it or someone close to them, you don't think about it, you don't talk about it, and you're not going to be online researching about it unless you have a reason for it. So, like with drugs and alcohol, unless you're being affected by it or you want to know more about it, then that's when you'll start Googling or reaching out for things of that nature. So, I think that's a common, if you don't talk about it, you don't think about it, then you don't have to worry about it, if that makes sense.
It does. So, on the topic of trying to destigmatize all the education and the topic in general, as a student, what can I do to help reduce the stigma surrounding sexual assault?
So from what I've seen, I think talking about it with your friends, when things come up in the news, saying, "Hey, did y'all see this?" And like in a way that is starting a conversation as opposed to a making a joke, right? I think that something that, at least when I was in college, but it's been a few years, individuals making jokes about victims or playing light of victims or automatically jumping to not believing victims. So really having a mindset that is, I'm going to educate myself on kind of this topic a little bit more, and I'm going to talk about it with the people around me. I'm going to practice consent with the people around me. I'm going to, not tolerate rape culture. I'm not going to tolerate jokes like that. This is maybe silly, but if I'm like on social media or something and I see someone who very blatantly has left a comment or something that should not be there and condones sexual violence, I'll report it. It's not up to me if it gets taken down, but even just little things like that, because I always imagine, what if a survivor sees this, right? And yeah, I think just little things like that, talking about it, that's one of the best ways to bring awareness, and then keeping yourself and those around you, accountable.
I agree with Faith 100%.
Okay, awesome. Well, I wanted to focus more on the impact it has on college age students because obviously we unfortunately are the most predisposed population to experience any kind. And I completely agree. I think that there are definitely small things that everybody can do, including myself, to just either shut down a joke that someone randomly says or report something or just try to make it more okay to talk about. Which is, I would like to think, what we try to do, especially with having open discussions when people do actually come to our class and talk with us. It makes it a safe space to share, and it makes it a very valuable educational experience because you can take that information with you. And again, you can share it with your friends, and sometimes that might lead them to reach out and use those resources. So instead of focusing on students, now I have a couple corrections related questions as well. So a topic that comes up fairly often in my sentencing and corrections course, which is the course that I'm actually doing this project for, is the prevalence of sexual assault, specifically in correctional facilities. And do you think that organizations like RCEA may eventually branch out to assist offenders or staff who have been sexually assaulted in these correctional facilities? I know it's a complicated question.
Yeah. Let me think. How, Faith, do you have anything to say until I can think on that one for a second?
So I think that a victim is a victim. It irregardless of, you know, what they may have done in their past, that is not up to us. Um, you could murder someone and you can still be a victim of sexual violence, right? There's no, oh, we don't, you know, help these people, we don't help those people. So I think long term, yes, I think that there would be an opening and a great opportunity to work with those who experience sexual assault in correctional facilities in an amazing, perfect, ideal world where there's not a lot of different considerations, right?
Yeah.
How do we help these people? How is it safe for Amanda as the victim service coordinator to go into these facilities, right? And little info about nonprofits, it can get really hard for people to work with us, especially our nonprofit. You know, it can be very difficult to convince people enough of them needing us and remembering to call us when these things happen and, you know, wanting to work with us, just because I think we all have so much on our plates already. Having to make that extra phone call sometimes is a lot. Especially before they understand, you know, what services we can provide. So I think that that is a needed service. I think that that would be a great thing to have. I I wish that, again, in a perfect world, there was a, you know, sexual violence task force and prevention and education and response team within prison systems. I think that would be awesome. Prisons had their own, you know, like sexual violence advocates, because, you know, there's so much nuance and culture within that. But I don't think that if we had a correctional facility reach out to us that we would say, no, we can't. But I'm gonna let Amanda kind of speak on that just because she is the coordinator of the victim services.
So what I would say is absolutely, if the jail called and said, "Hey, I've got a victim of sexual assault here," no matter what the offense is that they're locked up for, we could definitely go in there and give them services. Absolutely, because we do not discriminate. We can go in there and definitely, as long as it's in a safe situation, and go and help them. You know, if it was crisis counseling or something where, again, for safety matters, everything was in a, you know, in a great situation when we could walk in and provide those services. Absolutely. If the 24/7 crisis hotline is available to them, as long as it's okay on the other side of, you know, the prison's policies and how they, you know, they have their own line of what they have. I guess I was a little confused by the question. I didn't know if the question was asking, like, would we help the perpetrators of sexual assault, or were you meaning
Victims. Sorry. I should have
Okay,
specified
that's
that
the
more
reason.
specifically.
Okay, because I was a little confused when you asked the question, and that's why I was like, because what our role is to help the victim. So when you asked about the
Yes.
perpetrators, I thought you meant going in there with the perpetrators, and that's what I was confused about. So sorry. Okay.
No, you're fine. That's my fault for not clarifying.
Yes. So we would never deny anybody services. At all. I mean, we would definitely, I mean, we even go out to, you know, the youth development centers, you know, and a lot of those kids, you know, they're in there for truancy or they're in there for other matters. And our prevention educator goes out and talks with them on different subjects and, you know, talks about RCEA services, that, because, you know, they also have where they have certain goals they have to meet when they're in, you know, certain, they have their goals. And so in their service, what is it called? Their service, I can't think right. It's their treatment plan. That's the word I'm looking for. Their treatment plan. So we definitely do go out. And I do know when the prevention educator goes out to those facilities, you know, after the class discussions, the group discussions, a lot of them will come up and ask individual questions. And so absolutely, we will go to anyone and give services. It doesn't matter where they are. I mean, that's kind of like with, typically, you know, we go to court with our victim and survivors, or we'll go to the police station with them, or they can come out to our facility and have an officer come out here. But we also, you know, are in a situation where if an officer called us and they were at home or at the victim's home and they needed assistance, as long as that law enforcement officer felt that it was a safe for us to come out there, we would even go to their home and try to provide any kind of services we can for them. So we really do try to help as much as possible to anyone. So, but like Faith was saying, you know, there's so many policies and procedures with the facilities that they're in. And so absolutely, if they're willing to let us come in and, you know, if they had a group of individuals that were in there for a different crime, that they knew they were all victims of sexual assault, and a support group would help them. If we could work one-on-one with them to come in and have a group with them, we would definitely do it. And that's probably something we probably should move more towards, is, you know, reaching out to them and saying, hey, do you have a group of people that would need this service? We would love to give it. That would definitely be a great idea, to reach people and to help people.
So based off of that, we haven't really learned much about, outside of purely education, work experience, those kinds of programs. And then anger management, of course, those are also options for individuals who are incarcerated, but we haven't really learned about anything or heard about any programs like the kind of outreach that you guys provide for people. Do you think that correctional officers and other staff members should probably be trained to recognize, intervene in, and then be able to somewhat prevent sexual assault in correctional facilities?
I mean, I definitely think that everybody in any profession, even an accountant, should be educated on sexual assault and what that looks like, and just educating people. Because, like I tell people all the time, the chances in your personal life and your professional life, someone disclosing a sexual assault is very high. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't know what to do. What do I do? And simply giving them a card with a number on it to reach a resource that can help them has done a world of help for an individual and family members. So I think honestly that every person in every kind of major, every person in any kind of job setting, no matter the title of their job, should be educated. Absolutely, 100%.
I
And
think,
sorry.
I was just gonna say, this is something we actually do address. We do bystander training. It's bystander intervention training, trying to be an active bystander in situations. Whether, you know, we encourage people, you know, you don't know what's going to happen out of this situation, but if there's a chance that any sort of violence may happen, any sort of misconduct may happen, why not intervene? It's better to be safe than sorry. And so I think that, you know, we target those at all groups. We don't discriminate in what groups we provide this bystander training to. So I think that having more equipped bystanders who are willing to be active in situations, who have a little bit more information about what to do in these situations, I don't think that's ever a bad thing.
And I also would have to say, you know, one of the other things that we do is law enforcement trainings. And so we do go out to different, you know, police stations, and we will talk to the officers and the detectives and, you know, let them, one, know that we are a resource for them to help them do their job a little bit easier. Because officers, you know, their main goal is to get in there, get the facts, find the evidence to help that victim, you know, be able to prosecute against that perpetrator. That is their role. And so a lot of what we'll do is go out and let officers know, hey, if you have a victim or survivor that comes to you and they've been sexually assaulted and they're not really wanting to talk, there's a lot of, you know, feelings they're got going on, call us, let us come out there. Because one thing that I do strongly believe, and since we've been working with officers, is when you have a victim or survivor and they have had this happen to them, even though they know that they didn't do anything wrong, anybody that's in a uniform is very, very intimidating. It can be scary, and they don't know. And just like we were talking about social media, it really does give you an outlook of a lot of things. And police officers are not given the best reputation, I guess, in society. And therefore, that's the reason I always let people know that, like, I work with these officers, I work with all of them in all the counties, and I've never seen them disrespect a victim or survivor or not try to help them. But where I think is very helpful is we talk to the victim and survivors before they talk to police officers, because they making sure that people understand why they're asking the questions they're asking. Just clarifying, hey, they're going to ask you about, were you drinking beforehand? They're going to ask you about things that were happening. They're not doing that to judge you or to say, oh, this is for this or this didn't happen. They have to ask those questions in order to better help their case. And so I think educating officers and letting people know, hey, when you have someone come in that wants to make a statement, offer that victim advocate to them, because I can go in and say, hey, he didn't have to call me. She didn't have to call me. They call me because they want the best service for you, and explaining to them what the legal system looks like and that process and why the questions are asked. Because I know that when people ask you certain questions, it can feel very judgmental. Like it can. Because that's our first thought. And especially you have so much going on in your brain at the time when you're being questioned, it's really easy to say, oh my goodness, well, I know, because a victim or survivor is already beating themselves up inside about what happened. Well, I knew better. I knew I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have left my friends and went back to the apartment. They're already beating themselves up. And then you have someone ask questions like that, it automatically makes them feel. And so that's the reason it's just good for us to train officers on trauma informed care, like not, why did you do this or whatever. It can just rephrasing their questions of, tell me a little bit more about how you're feeling about this situation. And instead of why did you do this, just changing two words in a sentence can make a huge difference. And so we try to do that, but we also like to let the victim and survivors know why they're asking those questions, and that they're not being judged and they're not looking down on them. They have to do that to better serve them when it comes to that legal system. I just think that's very important. And that's why I think people need to realize why the questions are asked, and that they're not always in a negative outlook. It's actually in a positive outlook. But unless you're told that, you don't know that. And that's why educating people is so important.
In my perfect world, everybody would be educated. I wish it were easier, but I feel like so many populations could definitely benefit. And I actually brought it up in my sentencing and corrections course with Dr. Weaver after we had a visit with the RCEA. And I was just talking about how we've seen countless documentaries of people who are just re-victimized throughout their entire lives. And unfortunately, some of them it started with sexual violence when they're in their adolescence. And then it's only perpetuated in incarceration and upon release. And sometimes those individuals can just voice that they feel trapped. They don't know what to do. They might not be offered any resources to really help them depending on what facility they're in. And so I was just wondering, in a perfect world down the road, if a system like that could ever even be adopted. But I'm glad that at least there's some agreement that it could be a possibility. And my last thing is just final thoughts, wrap up. Do you guys have any words of encouragement or advice for anyone who may need help finding resources or who aren't comfortable coming forward about an assault?
So for me, I think that the one thing I like to reiterate is understanding it doesn't matter what you did, doesn't matter what you said, doesn't matter where you were, doesn't matter what you drank, doesn't matter where you were. A sexual assault is never a victim's fault. It is always on the perpetrator. There was this case recently of this individual who, which I won't get into the specifics, but her 50-year long marriage, she found out that, like, I think for 10 years of it, her husband had been drugging her and allowing people to rape her. And in the court case, she said a very amazing sentence. She was like, it's time to shift the shame to the other side, right? And so I think recognizing the shame lies completely within the perpetrators. It does not lie within any victims. You are a victim of a crime. And I think remembering that and giving yourself grace rather than shifting to, blaming yourself, guilting yourself, doubting yourself. Honor your experience, believe yourself. If you feel like something was wrong, right? Sexual violence is a very, personal thing. And if you feel comfortable, seek help, right? Seek help with professionals who have a little bit more information on the subject and maybe can get you some extra help you need for healing. I think that, I'm a therapist. I'm a big advocate for therapy. I think long term, that is an awesome thing for victims and survivors to be able to process this, allow someone else to help you process it. So yeah, I think the resource you mentioned earlier, RAIN, the Rape Abuse Incest National Network, awesome resource. If you or anyone across the country and go to their website, they can get you connected with your local crisis center based on your phone number. It's great. And if you need help with resources and you can't find any, reach out to me, reach out to Amanda. My email is rceaservices@gmail.com. Amanda's is rceaadvocate@gmail.com. Reach out to our rceainfo@yahoo.com email. Reach out. We can help you with whatever. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's not your fault. I believe you. There's a reason I've been in this field for 6.5 years almost at this point. I get frustrated with you. I get angry for you. And I feel like Amanda and I and anyone else in this field, we are working every day to try and basically make sure we don't have a job in the future, right? Because we want sexual violence to end, to decrease. So yeah, reach out. Not your fault. I believe you.
So I would say what my message would be is it is okay not to be okay, but we just can't stay there. So that's my biggest thing is it's okay not to be okay. We just can't stay there. And letting people know that they do not have to be alone. That even if they have family and they have all the support, it's okay to reach out to other people and allow them to help you. We can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it. And this is a healing journey, and not every day is going to be a good day. And you may take a step back, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, there are people like Faith and I and RCEA. There are people there that are always there 24/7 to listen and to help you through the process. That it's not your fault, that, sexual assault is not about lust or anything of that. It is about control. It's about power and control. And that there is nothing they did to cause this to happen. And it is very unfortunate that it happened, but there is a healing journey. It may not, be next week when you're feeling 100%. It may be 2 years down the road, but there is always people here to help you and to navigate that life with you. And I think that's just one of the biggest things, is just letting people know that there are people here that care, and they're here because they want to be, and they're going to help you through this, however that looks. And that they have the control. We're going to give them that control back by them making the decisions, and we give them, our job is not to give them advice. Our job is to give them their options and support that, however that may look. And so we will be on that roller coaster with them through that entire time until they get to where they want to be and need to be.
That's awesome. So long message short, everybody's not alone. Everybody has resources. RCEA will always be there to support you whenever you need them, however you need them. That's all I have for me. So thank you guys both so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
reaching out to us. I think that this is definitely something that's opened our eyes to yet another sector of individuals we could be reaching, right? Um, it's always great to learn about new opportunities and maybe new growth steps for us and new populations. So this was really informative on our end as well. And we really appreciate you, asking us to do this podcast.
And let us know if we ever can help you.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Have a
Awesome.
good
All
one.
right. Well, we are going to sign off on the podcast now. Thank everyone for listening. Thank you so much, Sydney, for again reaching out, spending almost an hour with us just talking about this. This is one of those steps, right? You asked how we can destigmatize this, these partnerships. A university student taking an hour on their Thanksgiving break to want to talk about sexual violence. So thank you again, and thanks to all of our listeners, and we will see you at the next podcast. Bye.